And I believe we are live. Hey everybody, this is Josh Seartson of World Alternative Media here. Before we begin talking about the insanity happening in Minneapolis right now and elsewhere in the world, make sure to hit the like button. Join us on other alternative social medias like BitChute and Float.app. All links below. And share this on social media because this is definitely going to be shadow banned. Anyway, YouTube always shuts down our live streams, so let's get right to it. I do want to first off say I got surgery like 2 days ago. Took out 2 wisdom teeth and they cut into the jaw and everything, so I'm not even supposed to be talking right now, but I cannot avoid this insane news that's happening on a regular basis here, so I'm going to get right into it. Again, hopefully YouTube does not shut down our stream. I'm going to bring up some articles here on the screen and we'll get right into it here. So let me pull this up. We are doing this live. All right. As we see here, police precinct burns as George Floyd protests erupt. Of course, Officer Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd, though there's a lot of information that's very sketchy regarding George Floyd having actually known the officer, worked security at the same club together. And a lot of people are questioning how this isn't, like, a lot of people are saying this is a psyop. I'm going to go into this a little bit right now because I'm not 100% sure yet. One thing I do know is that they're using it to their advantage to create a psyop, and that's something that we really need to be watching closely. We saw Umbrella Man recently, this guy who is obviously an agent provocateur in all, like, police-issued helmets and gloves and boots, break into the auto zone a couple nights ago, which started a fire, which led to riots. And this is something I want to kind of go into quickly before we get into the latest news regarding what's happening there in Minneapolis and elsewhere in the world, is that when you have a bunch of people that are pissed off, stuck inside for months, you have vast poverty before your eyes, as we've been reporting like a lot lately, due to the government, not the coronavirus, but due to the government shutting things down, pushing people into their houses and treating people as non-essentials, treating people like slaves. What you're going to have next is people rising up, and all it takes is a minor infraction. Now, police murder people every single day. They're henchmen of the state. The police are the enforcers of tyranny. Without the police, and I guess to some degree the military, but mostly police, the government has no power. They only have fear. So the police are basically the guys that go out there and enforce things for the government. And all it takes is a little infraction at this point in time when everyone's in need and everyone's impoverished and we see this chaos all over the world, for people to rise up. And we saw people rise up after Officer Derek Chauvin, while a bunch of other cowardly police officers watched, murdered George Floyd. So then people are rightly pointed to the government. They go to the police precincts. They go after the government buildings. Right. But then it takes one agent provocateur to hit one of the small businesses, and in some cases, obviously the big businesses, Target, etc., and Arby's, for everyone to be shifted over to that. So then you have people on the left saying, we need to do this because we are trying to get justice, which obviously burning down a small business or a pawn shop or breaking into a pawn shop and stealing liquor from a liquor store isn't getting justice. They say, we want to get justice. And then on the right, you have people going, oh, these guys attacking cops, look at them. They look like a bunch of idiots walking around with booze in their hands and their pants around their knees and all that kind of stuff. And then you got the divide that the establishment wanted. They always, it's divide and conquer, my friends, and order out of chaos. They always co-opt every movement. So people get misdirected, they get distracted and start looking at the guys that are breaking into the stores rather than at the actual movement against government. This is an issue of government. This isn't an issue of race. They turn it into a race because they know people will clash over it. And then, obviously, Trump called in the National Guard, called everyone thugs. And, you know, the truth is the media misdirected people. And we're really seeing the media work really hard to divide people right now. We see, for example, CNN, go figure, I'm not even reading the CNN original article. Minnesota police arrest CNN reporter and crew on live TV as they cover Minneapolis protests. This happened earlier this morning. And, of course, they went after the black reporter while the white reporter was right there. It was obviously set up. And when people say, Well, what does that benefit the police to be involved in that setup? Order out of chaos. It'll make people more mad, more people clash, more people get angry, more people attack each other, and then the police have, quote unquote, more justified reasons to lock everyone down, to basically attack people who are just trying to, get justice for police murdering people. They end up getting more power. It gives them more power when there's more chaos. So that's what I really wanted to put forward here, is that what they are doing currently is an orchestrated psyop. We have agent provocateurs involved. We have a real thing that they're using as, they don't want to let a crisis go to waste. They have a real thing. There's evidence that George Floyd knew Officer Derek Chauvin, worked together as security, and that they actually that they knew each other, and perhaps George Floyd knew a bunch of stuff about him, and that he was a dirty cop and all that kind of stuff, and that it was an orchestrated murder. Other people say they're both actors. I don't know. Look, guys, one thing I do know is that the media distracts attention from people rightly going after the government. I have no sympathy for the police, and going after the police station, fine. But then they go after pawn shops and stuff like that, and then this guy's called a racist for shooting a guy who's breaking and killing him, who's breaking into his pawn shop and trying to steal everything and his livelihood. And then on the other side of things, there's also business owners that are saying that they want to, they said, let my business burn. I'll bring up this article on the screen here for you guys. Let my building burn. Minneapolis restaurant owner responds to protests and violence. And in many ways, a lot of these people with the shutdown, they've lost so much money, they are bankrupt. 52% of small businesses say they will not survive after this is over with the coronavirus shutdowns. And then with his business burning down, they get insurance, and it's an easy way around it, because then they don't have to burn down their business for insurance. Here's some of the news stories that are coming up on our radar. Minneapolis rioter says, we're going to start coming to the suburbs. So there's some fear there. A lot of people are concerned about this moving into the suburbs and moving into neighborhoods and burning down homes, which obviously isn't okay. Go after the police and the government, guys. Don't go after innocent people living in their homes. Officer charged with killing George Floyd arrested. Governor apologizes for abject failure in response to unrest. And the update here is the charges against the officer include murder and manslaughter. Prosecutors say Minneapolis ex-officer charged with murder, manslaughter, according to WCCO. Chauvin is now the first white police officer in the history of Minnesota to be charged with murder while on duty, one reporter tweeted. Again, they're making it about race. It should not be about race. It should not. Countless people get killed constantly at the hands of the government. The government, my friends. Of course, there is a misallocation of use of force against black people, but I think that's also an issue that's economic and due to history of, the CIA infiltrated black families and destroyed black families going back to the 40s, 50s. We interviewed, of course, Freeway Rick Ross a couple months ago in Acapulco, Mexico. He, of course, ran hundreds of millions of dollars worth of crack into LA, into black communities, working with the CIA. They've been working hard to destroy that community and make more dependence and more chaos within those communities, which helps people divide more, and it goes back to Julius Caesar again, divide and conquer. And then you have interesting stories like this that plays into the technocracy we've been warning about. U.S. government now flying MQ-9 Reaper drone over Minneapolis as riots worsen. By the way, guys, if you haven't hit the like button, make sure to hit the like button on this video and share on social media. We are incredibly shadow banned here. If my face looks funny, that is because I just got surgery 2 days ago. My doctor told me not to be talking, but there's great news, so I have to talk regardless of the swelling. It's a lot better than it was before. But anyway, if you're just joining us right now, I believe we are witnessing a hell of a psyop right now. Now, I believe that from all the evidence I've seen, other than the info that the Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin knew George Floyd from working security at a club with him. Other than that, I'm not seeing evidence that it was all fake. What I do know is fake is the protests were misdirected. We have agent provocateurs breaking windows and starting the riots. The riots break out, and then people are distracted by them going into businesses, and not the fact that they're taking action from the police buildings. We see this on the right too in Michigan. Just a month ago, the militia going to the Capitol building. No shots were fired, but they demanded things open up, and in many cases things did open up with that pressure. Threatening the government helps, because the government wants you in fear, and they need to be in fear of us. That's just the fact. We're talking about the biggest organized crime racket in the world, and they utilize the police to enforce their tyranny. And obviously, I've been beaten up multiple times in my life by police. One time when I was 14, a cop came up from behind me, kicked me in the back, knocked me to the ground, and beat the crap out of me. I had long hair at the time. They were looking for a guy with long hair in the whole city of 850,000 people. And they beat me half to death. And they just left me bleeding in the parking lot, and they said, "Oops, wrong guy," and walked away. And they've smashed my head into cop cars, into cop cars for drinking a beer once outside, into the roof and everything. I mean, look, guys, I've been through this. I've dealt with this, and I am no fan of police. There's two sides to every story. I don't support police at all going around extorting people, arresting people, beating people. I also don't support small businesses being burned to the ground and that being justified. They're doing that in order to divide the movement into a racial issue, into a class issue, rather than an issue of statism. And that's the issue. Statism. Not race, statism. Statism uses race against us, but it's not race that's the root of the issue. It is statism. And we need to remember that, my friends. I'm going to get to questions shortly in the live chat. I cannot get super chats here anymore, so make sure to check the links below. YouTube demonetized me, and I'm not even able. So Patreon, GoFundMe, Subscribestar, join us on Float, join us on BitChute. We're leaving YouTube very shortly if they don't kick us off first. But anyway, I'm going to go into some more stuff here. Let me just pull up a few stories here. Let's see. Here, I'm going to pull this one up, I guess. I hate CNN, but we break down the story that they're trying to brainwash us with. This one from CNN. The Minneapolis police officer who knelt on George Floyd's neck had 18 previous complaints against him, police department says. Well, of course, because police are above the law. It's always the case. And you know, what's crazy right now is that a lot of people aren't noticing, but in Ecuador, there are massive riots and huge police. There's huge police presence in Chile. There's huge police presence in Hong Kong. There's huge uprisings in places like Spain and in Greece, and no one's talking about it. I mean, my friends, here, protests, Hong Kong protests 2020. Let's see what's going on here. And we just get up-to-date information on this, of course. Countless people hitting the streets. Countless people moving into the streets due to China's attempt to take over Hong Kong. And this will continue happening. This is an issue of government, and people are sick and they're restless. They're tired of being used and abused and attacked and beaten and told to obey. And then, you know, Trump comes in and he brings in the National Guard in a place like Minneapolis because they need to be taken under control. Look, police provocateurs, the government started the riots in the first place. They're the government in the first place murdered George Floyd. And the government in the first place utilized the media to prop up a huge psyop. They want to misdirect us. It's the same thing we saw with the Tea Party. It's the same thing we saw with the Occupy. No matter what side of the spectrum it might be on or outside of the spectrum, they always do this, my friends. And we cannot fall for it. There is an abundance of evidence of this. We saw this in Paris. We saw this with the Black Bloc groups and Antifa. I mean, they always use. They say we cannot stop this group of like 20 mercenaries, quote unquote. They call them often, or mobs going around breaking windows. But they can spend billions of dollars on the drones and the military, the MROP tanks, and this massive police presence. And I mean, it's all a lie. I believe this is all a lie. It's based on a lie. The story is true to begin with. George Floyd was murdered. But then immediately they knew that there was an uprising. There's a huge anti-government uprising happening around the world because people have been forced into their homes, extorted and impoverished over the last several months especially, but for, centuries. And then they come in and try to misdirect us to make this a racial issue so we attack each other instead of looking at the real enemies. And the real enemies is our government and central banks these extortionists and these rackets and the police that enforce the rules of these tyrants. Anyways, I'm going to take some comments from the audience here. We have one person say no sound. I'm pretty sure it's fine. You're the only one that seems to be saying that. Old Republic says like a Boston bombing. Yeah, exactly. Like Boston bombing. Don H says the question is, what is not a lie? Well, that's a really good question. I mean, for example, Donald Trump pulled out of the World Health Organization today. Is that just political virtue signaling to his base? Because the U.S. government on state levels are doing the exact same thing as the World Health Organization is calling for anyway. And they still have Fauci in there. And Fauci was funded by Gates, same as World Health Organization, and worked alongside the World Health Organization headed by Tedros, who is one of the heads of the Ethiopian Communist Party. It's all a lie. Everything we see today is a lie. Dire Wolf says, get out of the UN. Absolutely. Elda Moza 21 says this is worse than 9/11. Well, it is the biggest false flag in history. Not the Minneapolis riots necessarily, though it's being used as a false flag. But generally speaking, I think that we are witnessing the biggest false flag ever with the shutdowns leading into this. And they turn it away from government, turn the disfavor away from government and onto races, the race of an individual. They use identity politics. It's a religion among so many people on the left and the right. Seriously, on the left and the right. You have people on the right that just, they fuel the fire so much. And then people on the left, they fuel the fire so much. Victimhood, victimhood, victimhood. And then on the right, oh, stop your victimhood, but also we want our certain culture to be enforced and blah, 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 using communist laws regarding the border, etc. And it's just, there's so much hypocrisy. It's all BS. But one thing that I notice is that it happens mostly when people start rising up against government. And we saw people go after the police stations. Great. I am not against that. I'm not advocating it, but I'm not against it. I have to be sure to be careful about the community guidelines here on YouTube, so I have to be careful what I say. Ryan Smith says, Josh, you look different. Yeah, I just had surgery 2 days ago. 2 wisdom teeth extracted. One, they had to cut it out of my jaw, so I'm swollen. But I was told not to talk. But I'm on lots of painkillers, so I'll be fine. I need to cover this news. This is crazy news happening right now. But anyway, they misdirect immediately when people rise up against government and turn it into an issue of race. And Lyle Merritt says, CNN faked being arrested to scare you into obeying the state. Well, yeah, but more than that, friends. Let me pull up that article for a second if I still have it somewhere here on the screen. What happened to CNN this morning was a clear, orchestrated arrest. I mean, they're literally on camera with CNN badges, CNN microphones, CNN jackets on, CNN cameras, and the police are apparently, they don't believe them that they're actually reporters with a giant camera in the street, microphone talking to, and they didn't go after the white CNN reporter a half a block away. They went after the black one. It was all orchestrated in order to, first of all, make that guy's career, Omar Jimenez, much bigger because he's new and young. And then on top of that, to put CNN on the news, and most importantly, to make this more about race again. They made it very clear. They went after the black reporter, not the white one. It's so clear what they're doing here, guys. I mean, come on, look at this. As if. Seriously? It's ridiculous. And then the governor had them released from prison immediately after. And according to the police, they said, we told them to leave and they didn't leave. And then the CNN reporter said, no, they didn't tell us to leave. They just showed up and arrested me live on air. I mean, come on, look at that stupid mask. Anyway, it was so clearly orchestrated. And it's, again, it just tells us more. The whole world's a stage, my friends. The whole world is a stage. Rika the Hopeful Voluntarist says, serfdom is all the rage, I've heard. Yeah, absolutely. My dad says, Brad, he had 2 wisdom teeth pulled. Yes, I had 2 wisdom teeth pulled 2 days ago. Shinobi Wan says, no super chats. Sad, Susan Witchick Wiki. Yeah, they banned me from making any money off of any videos now. I'm not allowed to get super chats. So check the links below. Join us on BitChute, float.app, flote.app. And also make sure to pledge, donate any way you can. YouTube keeps shutting down our live streams, so I don't doubt that this video will go down any moment now. They say video output's low, but my upload speed is 85 megabytes per second, so there's no reason for them to say it's low. Let's see. Mickey says, wow, no super chat. Yeah, so if you guys can go fund me, and also I'll put it in the chat here. You can PayPal at Ziggy33@mail.com. Not Gmail, but mail. I'll put that there. That's for PayPal. Anyway, so as many of you guys know, I came to Mexico because I believe people are more free here. The government might be bigger, quote unquote, as far as what they promise and they enforce, or they claim to enforce, but they're not able to enforce it. In the U.S., what we're witnessing right now is a fascist communist uprising. More excuse for security, more excuse for spying, more excuse for police presence, more excuse for social credit, more excuse for tracking, and all of that. I'm so sick of people falling for it. We saw this in Ferguson. We saw this in so many other places, and we keep falling for this agenda of divide and conquer. Every time we start going after the government, rightly so, they turn it into an issue of race, so that we can clash with each other pointlessly and needlessly instead of focusing on the real enemies of mankind. Let me just pull up a few things here. If you haven't seen, I'm just going to bounce through this stuff here. Many of you guys have probably seen the Umbrella Man. The Umbrella Man breaking windows, which really started the riots. The National Guard has been called in, by the way. But this Umbrella Man has been making a lot of headlines, starting the fire at the AutoZone, which really kicked off a lot of stuff and led to basically, well, I mean, look, they're focusing on the police buildings, and then it turned into private businesses right after this. And this guy who's wearing a police-issued helmet, police-issued mask, police-issued gloves, police-issued shoes and boots shows up and just starts breaking the windows. Protesters were trying to stop him, and he just took off and wasn't seen again. And then everyone started focusing on the businesses, and then you divide the movement, and then you end up with a bunch of people saying, see, all these thugs are going around breaking things. Maybe the police need to stop them. The police were called off. They stood down, which doesn't usually happen, by the way, unless they want some chaos. They did that in, I think it was, G20 in Toronto in 2010 or something. They did that exact same thing. They literally put a police car in the middle of the road, took the equipment out, and left the doors open so that someone would start on fire so they can get images to justify force. And they do this every time, my friend, every freaking time. Oh man. Anyway, for those just tuning in, I'm trying to keep up with this news as best as I can. I apologize, I haven't been on top of it, but I got surgery 2 days ago, so I haven't been able to really keep up with doing the videos, but I have been watching every second of it. And it was clear for me the second it switched was the second they started going after pawn shops, and a pawn shop owner shot a guy. There's also evidence that a few people burned to death, protesters burned to death last night. I was watching Unicorn Riot on Facebook, his live stream, and I hosted a watch party on Facebook for that so we can analyze the footage and talk about it. A lot of people were very high on drugs and meth, and these are the provocateurs. Many people from out of state that weren't from Minneapolis that were suddenly shipped in, came out of nowhere within 24 hours. Suddenly all these guys are there and they're doing hard drugs and then breaking things. Then they shift over the momentum from being anti-government to being a racial thing to being a lot of people that are obviously not well in the head. And then people stop supporting it, and then the government wins again because now they have more police. Now they have more crackdowns. Now they have basically martial law happening. And again, like we saw with Ferguson, the National Guard has been called in. And notice how Ferguson just kind of teetered off because it became a federalized issue. And then I think they ended up giving a bunch of people money. I'm sure they're going to come in, print some money, throw some money around. I was talking to a guy who worked in Hollywood last night who was talking about how they did that back in the 60s, how they blew a cannon of money at protesters at this major racial protest back in the 60s, and everyone just went home. That was it. They got money. And it's so sad because so many people are so weak-minded. I was watching some of the interviews and no one knows why they're protesting. You should be protesting because the government murders people. They kill more people than any other entity in the world, and the police are the ones that enforce the tyrannical laws of the government. They're the henchmen, if you will, of the organized crime racket. We have anarchy. We just have a gang that goes around extorting people that we call government and people vote for. Mickey says, you think Floyd is still alive? No, I don't see any evidence of that. If I do, I'll definitely report on it. But from what I'm seeing, he died, but they're creating order out of chaos. Though, I don't know. At first, the videos were disappearing off the internet of him being killed, but then they were suddenly allowed everywhere, and then they're pumped into our heads, and then they misdirect people. So I believe that they're doing whatever they can to make this a psyop. And they're pretty successful in it because, again, it was turned into race. Where I see white reporters walking down the street and Hispanic ones too in Minneapolis getting screamed at for being white or Hispanic, and you don't understand, I'm black, and you guys murdered us, and all these guys are like, yeah, you're right, we murdered you. And I'm just like, no, this isn't about race, for God's sakes. This is about government. This is about tyranny. This is about control of the masses. This is about dependency. This is about collectivism. This is about violence versus peace, force versus voluntary interactions. But people get misdirected, as always, and start looking to the government to help them to help save them from the problems of government. And then you have people divided over race and classes, and people are breaking into businesses, destroying people's small businesses. Though I will add that after the shutdown, a lot of these people are going to be happy with the insurance they get from a lot of this after being bankrupted by the government. It wasn't the coronavirus that did it, it was the government. And again, we see huge uprisings in Hong Kong right now, as I've been reporting on, and I did a video on it a couple days ago that most of you probably didn't see due to the fact that we're shadow banned. And there's protests in Ecuador. Let me see. Protest 2020. There's very little info on this coming out right now, but there's protests in Ecuador as well that very few people are talking about. And this is an issue of government, my friends. Government. And look at this. Over 9 million U.S. families fear they cannot afford food next month. You push people into a corner and they bite back. But then the government comes in and tries to, misdirect and point it in another direction. And it's just really sad. It's always the way it's been. Day says, sounds like hired provocateurs paid for by. Old Republic says, what about the Somalis? You mean in Somalia or in the United States? I mean, I know there's uprisings all over the world. It's impossible to keep up with all of them right now. It's pretty intense. Rika the Hopeful Voluntarist says, rebellion while people don't even refuse to wear masks in public. I know. A lot of these people are using the masks to their benefit. What's crazy right now is that... I just imagine Karen showing up and yelling at all these protesters, put on a mask, you're wearing your mask wrong, and keep it down, it's loud, and where's the police? This is really where we're at in society, and it's become meme culture. But I don't believe in revolution. I believe in evolution via technology. Evolution, not revolution. Revolution always leads to more government, unfortunately, and it's just we have a real long history of witnessing that happen, and I just don't think it usually goes in the right direction. I apologize if I'm a little out of it. I'm trying to keep up with this news. Again, I got surgery 2 days ago. They cut out a wisdom tooth, 2 of them, but run out of my jaw. It was torture, and I'm on a lot of painkillers. It's unbelievably painful. They said don't talk for like a week, and I'm like, it's me. So I'm missing all this news, and I'm still watching every moment of it, but I'm like, I can't talk. Yesterday, my jaw was like pretty messed up, and this was like out to here. So, I mean, it's very swollen right now. I'm trying my best to keep up with it and report all this to you guys because I think it's important to stay on top of all of this. Nephew Silver says, could this be a psyop? It's awfully close to election time for this kind of stuff to happen. Yeah, if there even is a federal election this year. Yeah, well, they politicized it. I think it was a real thing that happened, though there is evidence. Well, it's confirmed that Officer Derek Chauvin knew George Floyd and worked security with him. But I don't know. Maybe he was coming out against him as a bad cop or whatever. But one thing I know is a guy was murdered in the streets, and as a bunch of cops watched, and a bunch of spectators did nothing, by the way, except for yell, which just pissed me off. This guy has a huge history, and they use order out of chaos. So again, they go after the government force of protesters. So good, that's good. And then it turns into, oh, but robbing liquor stores. And one guy apparently burned alive, trying to steal liquor. And it's like, and then people don't support them anymore. They go from supporting them to not supporting them anymore. If you watch police brutality videos on YouTube or anywhere, it's hard not to be pissed off. And I've been beaten up by police many times. I've been attacked by police. I've been followed, and when I used to be hosting big protest events when I was younger, they would follow me around just to intimidate me, and they admitted to it later on. I'm not a big fan of protests much anymore because it's asking usually for permission rather than being the permission, which I think is more important. But nonetheless, if you're going to go after anyone, go to the government buildings for sure. But when they start going after small businesses, that's stupid. I don't really feel bad about the Arby's. I feel bad for the employees more people that can't work, but they wouldn't be able to anyway because the whole area is shut down. And there needs to be chaos every now and then. It's just, where is it directed? And it's always misdirected by the government. And now they're using this to take federal control over a city. And I lived in Winnipeg, Canada when I was younger. We got all the Minnesota news. We got all of the news from WCCO. We got all the news from Minneapolis and the Twin Cities, St. Paul. And I mean, man, we got television from Minneapolis and Rochester, Fox Rochester. And there was always police brutality complaints there. I mean, there's a huge history of police brutality in Minneapolis. The Minneapolis police are absolutely insane, and there's just a long history of that. But again, they are misdirecting people, and they're creating order out of chaos. Anatha View says, and you get generation through their too smart for history. I'm sorry, I don't understand your comment. One person says, it's just a meaningless ritual. Yeah, well, they do create, it is kind of like a ritual where they kind of put you in the spiral of more uprising leading to more control, more uprising to control. They control the uprising, and then it just goes in the circle forever. The protests were shut down by the shutdown. The shutdown was shut down by the protests. The protests will likely be shut down by another false shutdown. Or the protest, it goes in a circle. I feel like I'm in a loop here. It's like I'm going a little bit crazy. It's like Groundhog Day at this point. Rika, the hopeful voluntarist, you're talking to someone else. By the way, you can't send super chats right now because YouTube won't allow us. Hit the like button, share on social media to get around the shadow banning. As you can see, we have 197 people watching out of 141,000 subscribers. We are insanely shadow banned. Join us on float.app and join us on BitChute. More importantly, just go to those sites. I mean, and help any way you can. Pledge, GoFundMe, Patreon, Subscribestar. If you see our COINTREE account below, you can go there and you can donate in cryptocurrencies and many different ones, including Monero if you want to stay private. And you can send us a message with your donation if you want to. And join our new newsletter at www.iamband.com. Who here hasn't yet joined our new newsletter? Make sure to go there and join it. All you need is to put in your email. We really, really appreciate it. It really does help us a lot. iamband.com, all linked below in the description. Right-click and open in a new tab, my friends. Let's see. A lot of people are saying Floyd is still alive. I don't know. I've seen no concrete evidence of such a thing, so I'm holding off my speculation until I really get some evidence. One person, I can't read your name because it's symbols, another language, but it says, the government, it's like a religious cult. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is a cult. It's a religion. It is. You have instead of the hymns, you have the Pledge of Allegiance. Instead of the cross, you have the flag. Instead of, the televangelists, you have the media. Instead of Sunday school, you have the schools. Instead of, I guess the national anthem would be the hymns. Instead of like the pontiff or the priest or the reverend, you have, or the imam, I should mention as well.